My female CEO laughed when I asked for a raise at 50. She said maybe I should consider an advisory role. So I took my personal algorithms to her biggest rival. One phone call later, they offered me 35% more. She had no clue what was coming. So there I was, standing in a glass corner office that probably cost more to furnish than my annual healthcare premiums, watching a woman half my age laugh directly in my face. 12%. That's all I asked for. A 12% raise after 18 years of keeping this company's entire infrastructure from collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. And this woman, this Stanford MBA with the perfectly highlighted blonde hair and the designer blazer that cost more than my mortgage payment, she actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A genuine, shoulder-shaking, tears-forming laugh. At your age, Nathan, we're thinking more about transitional roles. Her name was Audrey Walsh, CEO of DataCore Systems. 35 years old. She couldn't even finish the sentence without another wave of giggles hitting her. Maybe a part-time advisory position would be a better fit. Something with less pressure, less responsibility. You've earned a gentler pace. Her Stanford MBA diploma gleamed on the wall behind her like some kind of trophy, right next to a photo of her shaking hands with some tech billionaire at a conference. Everything in that office was designed to remind you who was in charge. And apparently, being in charge meant you could laugh at someone who'd been keeping your company alive since before you graduated college. I'm Nathan Mercer, by the way, 50 years old, Director of Cloud Engineering at DataCore Systems. And until that exact moment, I was the kind of guy who believed that hard work eventually gets recognized. The naive kind of guy who stayed loyal to one company for 18 years while watching 26-year-old developers with half my experience get promoted because they understood social media algorithms better than enterprise architecture. My wife Rachel calls me stubborn. She's been saying it for 23 years of marriage, and honestly, she's not wrong. My kids think I'm ancient because I still prefer proper documentation over Slack messages, because I think face-to-face meetings have value, because I don't check my phone during dinner. Old-fashioned stuff that apparently makes me a dinosaur in the modern workplace. But here's what Audrey Walsh didn't understand. My so-called outdated approach had kept her precious billion-dollar infrastructure running flawlessly for nearly 2 decades. While she was at Stanford learning about disruptive innovation and synergy matrices and whatever other buzzwords they teach in MBA programs, I was in server rooms at 3 in the morning making sure her company didn't implode. While she was networking at campus mixers, I was debugging code that prevented catastrophic data breaches. The cloud migration project I designed saved us $8.5 million annually. My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. The security framework I built prevented 5 major breach attempts last year alone, including that ransomware attack in October that would have cost us everything. I have documentation of every single incident. Audrey waved her hand like she was swatting away a fly, still chuckling, leaning back in that ergonomic chair that probably cost $8,000. Her manicured nails tapped against the armrest in a rhythm that suggested she was already thinking about her next meeting, about anything other than the person standing in front of her with 18 years of loyalty being dismissed like yesterday's garbage. Her office was designed to intimidate, all glass and chrome, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay, minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars, everything positioned to remind you exactly where you stood in the hierarchy. And where I stood, apparently, was at the bottom of her priority list. Everyone's replaceable, Nathan. Even senior engineers with decades of experience. She had this practiced CEO smile that never once reached her eyes. The kind of smile they teach you in executive coaching. All teeth, no warmth. The market's changed. We need agile thinkers. Fresh perspectives. Not legacy mindsets holding us back from innovation. She stared at me with the same expression you'd give a dog that just tracked mud across your white carpet. Inconvenient, messy, something to deal with and move past as quickly as possible. Maybe it's time to think seriously about that advisory transition. Consulting work can be very fulfilling for people in your situation. Part-time hours, flexible schedule, a graceful way to wind down your career without the stress of keeping up with younger colleagues. Something cracked inside me. Not my heart. Something deeper, more foundational. The structural integrity of 18 years of believing that experience would eventually matter more than age bias. That loyalty would be rewarded. That the company I'd helped build from a 200-person startup into a 2,000-employee corporation would remember who got them there, who stayed late, who missed family events, who sacrificed. All of that crumbled in the time it took her to laugh at a reasonable request. I had asked for a 12% raise, from $210,000 to $235,000. After 18 years of service, after building their entire security infrastructure from scratch, after saving them millions in potential breaches and downtime, after being the guy everyone called when something broke at midnight on a holiday weekend, 12% seemed reasonable. More than reasonable. It seemed modest, actually. Especially when healthcare premiums were eating 18% of my take-home pay. Especially when my daughter's MBA program was costing us $48,000 a year. Especially when my son's engineering school debt was piling up faster than I could save. Especially when Rachel's back surgery last year had cost us $12,000 out of pocket, even with our supposedly excellent insurance. I understand. I said it quietly, collecting my portfolio from her desk. The leather folder contained documentation of every major project I'd completed, every system I'd designed, every crisis I'd prevented, every weekend I'd sacrificed. 18 years of my professional life compressed into a 2-inch binder that she hadn't even bothered to open. The pages trembled in my hands as I tried to maintain whatever dignity I had left. Through the glass walls, I could see my colleagues pretending not to watch, heads buried in monitors, fingers hovering over keyboards without actually typing, ears straining to catch every word. The open office layout that supposedly promoted collaboration was really just a fishbowl, and I was the fish that just got flushed while everyone watched. Listen, Nathan. Audrey's voice shifted to that artificial concern that managers learn at those weekend leadership retreats. The tone designed to soften the blow while delivering it anyway. You're good at what you do. I'll give you that much. But you're expensive. The board sees a senior engineer pulling $210,000 when we could hire 2 computer science graduates for the same price. Fresh perspectives, modern frameworks, digital natives who grew up with this technology. That's just business. She shrugged like she was apologizing for bad weather. Like she had no control over any of this. Like she wasn't the CEO making these exact decisions. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. As if 18 years of my life was just a line item on a spreadsheet. As if the nights I stayed until midnight, debugging critical systems while she was networking at company galas weren't personal. As if missing my daughter Jessica's high school graduation because of a server crisis wasn't personal. As if the Christmas I spent in a data center instead of with my family wasn't personal. Everything about it was personal. And she had just made it even more so. That's when I knew exactly what I was going to do. I walked back through the open office to my workspace. Not even a real office after 18 years. Just a corner desk with a partial view of the parking garage. Because open office culture promotes collaboration and innovation. That's what the consultants told them when they renovated 5 years ago. What it actually promotes is anxiety and performative busyness, and the complete inability to focus on complex problems. But nobody asks the veteran engineers for their opinions on workplace design. We're just legacy mindsets, after all. My computer screen displayed the usual flood of notifications. Slack messages from junior developers asking me to review their code because they couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. Emails from other departments begging me to fix problems they'd created by ignoring my recommendations. Meeting invites for status updates that could have been emails. The constant digital noise of modern corporate life. Next to my keyboard sat a photo from last Christmas. The first Christmas we'd actually spent together as a family in 3 years. Rachel, looking tired but determined after her back surgery. Still dealing with physical therapy twice a week. Still in pain more often than she admitted. The surgery and rehab had cost us $12,000 out of pocket, even with insurance. The insurance that DataCore kept reminding us was a generous benefit. Generous enough that it only covered 80% of a necessary medical procedure. Jessica, my 22-year-old daughter, stress visible in her eyes even in a holiday photo. Worried about her MBA program at Northwestern. $48,000 a year. She'd wanted to go there since she was 16. How could I tell her no? How could I tell her that her dream was too expensive? Ethan, my 20-year-old son, already worried about his engineering school debt at Michigan, already looking at the numbers and wondering how he'd ever pay it all off, already learning that the American dream comes with a payment plan and interest rates. My family. The people I'd missed dinners with and weekends with and holidays with because I was too busy being loyal to a company that saw me as nothing more than a line item to be optimized. Healthcare premiums were eating $37,000 of my gross pay annually. The kids' education was draining our savings faster than I could rebuild them. Rachel's medical expenses kept piling up. The house needed a new roof. The car had 200,000 miles on it. And here I was being laughed at for asking for a 12% raise after 18 years of service. Here I was being told to consider an advisory position, a gentle transition, a graceful exit. Meanwhile, Audrey had just bought her second vacation home, according to the company newsletter. A ski lodge in Aspen to complement her beach house in Carmel. The same newsletter that featured her accepting an innovation award for the security framework I designed. The same newsletter that had never once mentioned my name in 18 years. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a small leather notebook I'd kept for years. The cover was worn smooth from handling. The pages yellowed slightly at the edges, filled with ideas I'd jotted down during lunch breaks, weekend thoughts, solutions that came to me during my commute on the Bay Bridge, random insights that struck at 3 in the morning and wouldn't let me sleep until I wrote them down. Inside were my personal projects, documented meticulously, dates, development notes, implementation details, testing results, every iteration, every improvement, every breakthrough. This wasn't company property. This was my intellectual playground, work I'd done on my own time, on my own hardware, in my garage lab on weekends while my family slept, using my own electricity and my own equipment and my own brain cells during hours that belonged to me, not to DataCore systems. The notebook contained algorithms I'd developed at home, security protocols I'd refined using my own servers, machine learning models I'd trained on hardware I'd purchased with my own money, code that DataCore had implemented without formal acquisition, because I'd been too trusting, too eager to be seen as a team player, too naive to understand that corporate loyalty is a one-way street with a dead end and a cliff. I flipped through the pages, each entry a reminder of nights and weekends spent building the future while Audrey Walsh was probably at networking events, learning about leadership optics and executive presence. Page 47. The predictive threat detection algorithm that saved DataCore from a ransomware attack that would have cost them $50 million in damages and lawsuits. Developed in my garage, tested on my personal servers, implemented at DataCore without any formal agreement, because my manager at the time said getting legal involved would slow things down. Page 63. The optimization framework that reduced our cloud processing costs by 34%. Written on a Saturday afternoon while Rachel took the kids to soccer practice. Shared with the company in a casual email because I thought that's what team players did. Page 81. The security architecture that won DataCore the Federal Reserve preliminary contract. The same contract Audrey had just bragged about in her quarterly investor call. The same contract she'd taken credit for without ever mentioning who actually designed the system that made it possible. The irony was bitter enough to taste. Strong enough to give you a headache. Audrey Walsh saw me as outdated. A legacy mindset. Dead weight. An expensive line item that could be replaced with 2 hungry graduates who didn't know enough to ask for reasonable compensation. But every major system keeping DataCore ahead of competitors had originated in this notebook. Every breakthrough that won them contracts. Every security protocol that saved them from disaster. All of it started right here, in my handwriting, developed on my own time. I stopped at my notes from April 2021, a series of machine learning algorithms for advanced threat detection that I'd developed during the pandemic lockdown. Rachel thought I was stress coding to cope with the uncertainty of the world falling apart around us. She wasn't entirely wrong. Coding had always been my escape, my meditation, my way of making sense of chaos by creating order. But those algorithms had become the backbone of DataCore's entire competitive advantage. Those late nights in my garage during a global pandemic had made Audrey Walsh look like a visionary leader, had won her awards, had bought her vacation homes, and she had just laughed at me for asking to be compensated fairly. I closed the notebook, slipped it into my messenger bag, and started making phone calls. The first call went to Patrick Sullivan, CEO of Sentinel Shield Technologies, DataCore's biggest competitor, a company that had been trying to catch up to us for years. I'd met Patrick at an industry conference 3 years ago. We'd talked shop for 2 hours over dinner while our colleagues networked and exchanged business cards. He'd tried to recruit me twice since then. Both times I'd declined out of loyalty to DataCore. Loyalty. What an absolute joke that word is. Nathan. Patrick's voice was warm when he answered. Genuinely pleased. Tell me you're finally ready to have a real conversation. I think it's time we talked about that offer. I could practically hear him smiling through the phone, could hear him sitting up straighter in his chair, could feel the energy shift from casual to serious in half a heartbeat. Dinner tomorrow? He asked. I know a place in Palo Alto. Quiet, private, good food. We can talk properly. I'll be there. That night, I told Rachel everything. The laugh, the dismissal, the advisory role suggestion, the raise request that got shot down like it was a joke. She listened with her arms crossed, leaning against the kitchen counter, that look on her face that I'd learned to recognize after 23 years of marriage. The look that said she was processing, calculating, planning. What did you do? She asked. I'm having dinner with Patrick Sullivan tomorrow. Her eyes widened slightly. Then a slow smile spread across her face. The same smile she'd had when she suggested we buy our house when everyone said we couldn't afford it. The same smile she'd had when she'd told me to take the data core job 18 years ago, because she believed in me. Good, she said. It's about time. We met for dinner the following evening at a quiet restaurant in Palo Alto, the kind of place where tech executives close deals over salmon and asparagus, where waiters know not to interrupt important conversations, where privacy is part of the ambiance. Patrick was 62, silver hair going white at the temples, the kind of calm confidence that comes from building something real over decades instead of inheriting it from a board desperate for quarterly results. He'd started Sentinel Shield in his basement 30 years ago, built it into a company with 800 employees. He understood what it meant to create something from nothing. The company I built isn't the same one it was 10 years ago, Patrick said between bites of salmon. The investors have opinions. The board has opinions. Everyone has opinions about how I should run things differently. But we still value experience, institutional knowledge, the kind of wisdom you can't download from a coding bootcamp or learn in a 2-year MBA program. He took a sip of water, set the glass down carefully. I've watched your career for years, Nathan. Read your papers. Studied the systems you've designed. The security framework that won DataCore the Federal Reserve contract. That was you, wasn't it? I nodded. Nobody at DataCore had ever asked me that question. They just assumed the credit belonged to whoever presented it at board meetings. Patrick smiled. I thought so. The architecture had your fingerprints all over it. Your philosophy. Your approach. He slid a folder across the table. Cream-colored paper with the Sentinel Shield logo embossed on the front. A formal offer letter. I opened it. The numbers made my eyes water. 285,000 base, plus equity stake, plus signing bonus. Full benefits with better coverage than DataCore's supposedly generous plan. Corner office. A team of 8 senior engineers reporting to me. Resources to actually implement ideas instead of just documenting them for managers who didn't understand them. More importantly, Patrick leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes direct and honest. We want your innovations. Properly acquired, properly credited, properly compensated. We understand that the algorithms you've developed are your intellectual property. We'd like to license them formally and give you full recognition for your work. Your name on the patents, your credit in the press releases, your legacy preserved. I stared at him, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch. What's the catch? Patrick laughed. A real laugh. Not the dismissive laugh of someone who thinks you're a joke, but the appreciative laugh of someone who respects direct questions. The catch is that you'll be working harder than you have in years, he said. We're competing for a major Federal Reserve security contract. The same one DataCore thinks they have locked up. Your threat detection systems could be the difference between winning and losing. I need you fully committed, fully engaged, fully present. He paused. But I also need you to know that your age is a feature, not a bug. Every engineer on the team I'm building for this project is over 35. Half of them are over 50. Experience matters to me. Wisdom matters to me. The ability to see patterns that younger engineers miss because they haven't lived through enough cycles. That matters to me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was talking to someone who respected both my experience and my potential. Someone who saw a 50-year-old engineer not as deadweight, but as a competitive advantage. Someone who understood that innovation doesn't have an expiration date. By the time dessert arrived, we'd outlined a transition plan that would bring my personal innovations to Sentinel Shield while staying completely within legal boundaries. Everything documented. Everything transparent. Everything Audrey Walsh should have done years ago if she'd valued long-term relationships over short-term cost savings. I called Rachel from the parking lot. I'm taking it, I said. Good, she replied. Come home. Celebrate with your family for once. 2 weeks later, I placed my resignation letter on Audrey Walsh's desk. The irony wasn't lost on me. Printed on company letterhead. Submitted through official channels. Following every protocol she claimed to value. Professional to the end. Respectful of process. 18 years of good behavior, culminating in the most meticulously formatted resignation letter in DataCore history. Even as I prepared to watch everything she'd dismissed burn to the ground. She barely looked up from her MacBook. Her attention split between emails and a video conference she'd muted. Multitasking that passed for leadership in her generation. Never fully present in any conversation because there was always something more important happening on a screen. 2 weeks' notice, she scanned the letter like it was a lunch menu. Where are you going? Some consulting firm? Early retirement? I'd considered lying. crafting some story about wanting to spend more time with family, about burnout, about pursuing personal projects. But truth had more impact, and I was done protecting her feelings. Sentinel shield technologies. That got her attention. Her head snapped up from the screen, eyes narrowing with the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her since that humiliating morning in her corner office. The first indication that she was actually processing information about me rather than just waiting for me to finish talking. Our biggest competitor. Her voice had an edge now. That's unfortunate timing. We're in final negotiations with the Federal Reserve to expand our security contract. The contract that's supposed to secure our position for the next 5 years. I know, I said simply. I built the threat detection model that won us that contract in the first place. Audrey's expression shifted from surprise to something resembling concern, maybe even fear. For the first time, I saw her calculating what my departure might actually cost the company, running the numbers on what they were about to lose, realizing that maybe, just maybe, she'd made a significant miscalculation. We should discuss retention options immediately. Her tone had changed completely. No more condescension. No more advisory transition suggestions. Perhaps that raise you mentioned, maybe 15%, plus a promotion to VP level. We can make this work, Nathan. I'm sure we can find a solution that works for everyone. The offer was everything I'd wanted that morning, more than I'd dared to ask for. If she'd shown this flexibility 8 hours earlier, none of this would have happened. If she'd opened my portfolio, if she'd looked at my track record, if she'd treated me like a valuable asset instead of an expensive liability. But some doors, once closed, can't be reopened with money alone. Some insults, once delivered, can't be taken back with counteroffers. The offer from Sentinel Shield is $285,000 plus equity, I said. But more importantly, they value experience over age bias. They don't laugh at employees who ask for reasonable compensation. She laughed, but it sounded hollow now, forced. Nothing like the confident dismissal from that morning. This laugh had nervousness in it, uncertainty, the recognition that she might have made a serious mistake. They're overpaying by at least $75,000. You'll be disappointed when they realize a 50-year-old engineer can't adapt to their development pace. When they see that legacy mindset in action, give it 6 months. You'll be back. I smiled, feeling that strange new confidence that came from finally knowing my worth, from finally walking away from people who couldn't see it. We'll see who's disappointed. My last 2 weeks at DataCore were surreal, like watching a nature documentary about animals sensing an earthquake before it hits. Suddenly, people who'd barely acknowledged me for years wanted to take me to lunch, pick my brain about projects, understand systems they'd ignored for a decade, ask questions they should have asked years ago. Middle management scrambled to document processes they'd never bothered to learn, realizing too late that institutional knowledge walks out the door with the people who created it. You can't download 18 years of context from a wiki page. You can't replace 20 years of pattern recognition with a knowledge base article. Kevin Park, the 28-year-old they'd assigned to shadow me during transition, looked more terrified every day. He was smart, capable, but he was being asked to absorb in 2 weeks what had taken me 2 decades to learn. He stayed late every night, taking notes, asking questions, trying to compress impossible amounts of information into his head. I felt bad for him, honestly. None of this was his fault. He was just a young guy trying to do his job in a system that had set him up to fail. I completed every transition document with professional thoroughness, trained Kevin as best I could in the time available, backed up all my personal project documentation, made sure everything I'd created on company time and with company resources was properly transferred. I also made careful copies of every email where I'd shared my personal innovations with the company, creating an evidence trail of DataCore's failure to properly acquire what they'd freely used. Every time they'd implemented my code without contracts, every presentation where they'd claimed credit for my work, every casual email where I'd offered solutions that became critical systems. All of it documented, all of it time-stamped, all of it preserved, not because I was planning legal action, but because I wanted to be prepared if they tried anything. If they claimed ownership of things I'd created on my own time, if they tried to stop me from using my own intellectual property. Audrey called me into her office on my last day. Her demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the laughing dismissal, replaced by something that almost looked like respect, though I suspected it was really just fear, dressed up in professional clothing. I want you to know there are no hard feelings, she said. You've been a valuable part of this organization. I wish you well in your future endeavors. I nodded, kept my face neutral, didn't give her the satisfaction of anger or the comfort of forgiveness. I walked out of DataCore's glass headquarters for the last time at 5:30 on a Friday in March. The security guard at the front desk, A guy named Vincent, who I'd chatted with every morning for 12 years, shook my hand firmly. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Mercer." He said it quietly, like he knew something I didn't. Like he'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. "I will." Rachel was waiting in the parking lot. She'd taken the afternoon off to drive me home, to mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. "How do you feel?" she asked as I climbed into the car. "Free," I said. "I feel free." By Monday morning, I was sitting in my new corner office at Sentinel Shield. An actual office, with walls, and a door that closed, and a window that looked out on actual trees instead of a parking garage. My team gathered for our first meeting. 8 senior engineers ranging from 38 to 54. Gray hair, wrinkles, experience, wisdom. The kind of people Audrey Walsh had dismissed as outdated legacy mindsets. "Here's what we're going to do," I said, pulling up my presentation. "We're going to take the threat detection algorithms I developed and make them even better. We're going to win the Federal Reserve contract that DataCore thinks they have locked up. And we're going to show this industry that experience isn't a liability. It's an advantage." They leaned forward, ready to work, ready to prove something. 6 weeks later, the first implementation of my security framework went live at Sentinel Shield. The same algorithms Audrey Walsh had dismissed as outdated legacy thinking. The same code she'd laughed about in her glass corner office. The same innovations she'd decided weren't worth a 12% raise. We were now detecting threats 48 hours before they materialized. Processing speeds increased by 35%. False positives dropped by 55%. Our sales team had hard data, proving we could outperform DataCore's best metrics by significant margins. The machine learning models I'd trained in my garage were predicting attack patterns with 92% accuracy. The threat detection system that had saved DataCore millions was now saving Sentinel Shield's clients even more, with my name properly credited on every patent filing, with my contribution acknowledged in every press release. When Sentinel Shield announced we'd won the expanded Federal Reserve contract, my phone started ringing. First call was from a trade publication wanting to interview the architect behind Sentinel Shield's security breakthrough. Second call was from a venture capital firm interested in licensing our threat detection technology. Third call was from a headhunter offering me a board position at a cybersecurity startup. Fourth call was from Audrey Walsh. I let it go to voicemail, watched her name flash on my screen, and let it ring through to that impersonal automated message. She called 6 more times over 2 days before leaving a message that I saved for posterity, that I played for Rachel and the kids at dinner, that I still have on my phone as a reminder. "Nathan, this is Audrey. We need to discuss consulting opportunities immediately. DataCore is prepared to offer a substantial compensation package for your expertise, your knowledge of our systems, your understanding of the Federal Reserve requirements. Please call me back as soon as possible. We made a mistake. I made a mistake. Let's talk about how to fix this." Her voice sounded different, strained, desperate, nothing like the confident dismissal from her corner office. I didn't return the call. 3 days later, Audrey was waiting beside my car in the Sentinel Shield parking garage, 6:30 in the evening. The garage mostly empty, just her Mercedes and my Honda, and the echo of footsteps on concrete. She looked different, tired, stressed, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. None of the polished confidence from that morning when she'd laughed at my raise request. Her blazer was wrinkled. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled. She looked like someone who hadn't slept well in weeks, who had watched everything she thought was secure start to crumble. "This is inappropriate," I said, maintaining distance while fishing for my car keys. "You've put 400 jobs at risk." Her voice was urgent, desperate, a far cry from the dismissive wave of her hand. "DataCore is facing an existential crisis because of the intellectual property you took." I stopped, turned to face her directly. Let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. "I didn't take anything that belonged to DataCore," I replied calmly. "I took my personal intellectual property that DataCore used without proper acquisition. Your legal team never did their due diligence, and you never valued experienced personnel enough to care about the details." She opened her mouth to respond. I kept talking. Every algorithm I brought to Sentinel Shield was developed on my personal equipment, on my personal time, in my garage using my own servers. I have documentation going back 5 years proving ownership. Your company used my work without contracts, without compensation, without even asking permission, because I was too loyal to say no, and you were too dismissive to notice the difference between company property and employee intellectual property. Audrey's face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks in real time. "That's not how this works," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You were an employee. Everything you created belongs to the company. That's standard. Check your employment contracts, I said. There's a clear distinction between work product created during company hours, using company resources, and independent intellectual property developed outside the scope of employment. Your legal team got sloppy. They assumed loyalty meant ownership. They were wrong. I unlocked my car, opened the door. You should probably talk to your lawyers before this conversation goes any further, I said. And maybe in the future, don't laugh at employees who ask for reasonable compensation after 2 decades of service. It tends to have consequences. I drove away, watching her shrink in my rearview mirror, standing alone in a parking garage, watching her golden future drive away. The fallout came faster than I expected. 2 weeks after I started at Sentinel Shield, I got a text from my old colleague Frank at DataCore. You need to see this. He attached a screenshot from the company's Slack. Audrey had sent a company-wide message announcing a hiring freeze and budget cuts. The timing wasn't coincidental. DataCore's quarterly earnings call was a disaster. I watched it live-streamed from my new corner office. Audrey sat at the head of the conference table, flanked by lawyers and PR people. She looked nervous, kept touching her hair. When an analyst asked about the Federal Reserve contract, she stumbled through some corporate speak about competitive dynamics and market conditions. Their stock dropped 18% in a single day. 18%. That's hundreds of millions of dollars in market value, evaporating because one CEO couldn't be bothered to take a raise request seriously. Analysts started asking pointed questions about talent retention, about institutional knowledge, about why their chief competitor had suddenly leapfrogged them in threat detection capabilities. The tech blogs picked up the story. Someone leaked that I'd left for Sentinel Shield. Someone else leaked the timing of the Federal Reserve decision. The narrative wrote itself. DataCore's genius CEO had driven away her best engineer and lost the company's most important contract in the same quarter. 3 weeks later, DataCore's main security system experienced a critical failure during a routine update. The kind of failure I would have caught in my sleep. The kind of failure that happens when you replace 18 years of experience with a 28-year-old who's been on the job for 6 weeks. Kevin Park did his best, but the system was down for 11 hours. 3 major clients filed formal complaints. 2 of them started shopping for alternatives. One of those clients called Sentinel Shield. I took the meeting personally. By month 4, DataCore's stock had dropped 28% from its peak. The board called an emergency session. Audrey presented a recovery plan that involved aggressive cost-cutting and accelerated hiring of junior developers. The same strategy that had created the problem in the first place. The board wasn't impressed. They laid off 160 employees, including Kevin Park. I heard he landed on his feet at a smaller firm in Seattle. Good for him. None of this was ever his fault. Sentinel Shield hired 73 former DataCore engineers within 4 months. Experienced people. Capable people. People Audrey had dismissed as too expensive. Patrick Sullivan personally welcomed each one of them. Told them their experience mattered here. Month 6. DataCore lost another major contract, this time to a startup that had licensed our threat detection technology. The same technology Audrey had laughed at. The same algorithms she'd decided weren't worth a 12% raise. I heard the news from Patrick during our morning stand-up. He mentioned it casually, like it was just another Tuesday, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. He knew what this meant. The dominoes kept falling. A healthcare company that had been with DataCore for 12 years announced they were switching to Sentinel Shield, then a regional bank, then a government agency. Each announcement hit DataCore's stock price like a hammer. Each departure validated my decision to leave. Month 7. Audrey tried to poach back 3 of the engineers we'd hired from DataCore. She offered them 20% raises and signing bonuses. All 3 declined. One of them forwarded me her offer email with a single comment. Too little, too late. I printed it out and pinned it to my bulletin board. Month 8. The board forced Audrey Walsh to resign. The announcement was buried on a Friday afternoon, the corporate equivalent of taking out the trash when nobody's looking. Her official statement mentioned wanting to pursue other opportunities. The unofficial story was that she'd been given a choice between resigning and being fired for cause. She was replaced by a 54-year-old executive named Robert Kimura. One of his first moves was reaching out to me about a consulting arrangement. I declined, but I appreciated the irony. Month 10. I got a call from a reporter at a tech publication. She was writing a story about DataCore's decline and Sentinel Shield's rise. She wanted to interview me about the transition. I told her the truth. All of it. The laugh. The advisory role suggestion. The 12% raise that started everything. The story ran with the headline, "The engineer they laughed at. How one executive's dismissal cost DataCore everything." Audrey Walsh's LinkedIn profile updated the next day. She'd removed data core from her work history entirely. The same week, I received an Industry Lifetime Achievement Award for contributions to cloud security architecture, a fancy dinner at a hotel ballroom, speeches and applause, and a crystal trophy with my name on it. Rachel was in the front row, still dealing with her back issues, but smiling bigger than I'd seen in years. She'd bought a new dress for the occasion, said she wanted to look good when her husband finally got what he deserved. Jessica had flown in from Chicago, taking a break from her MBA program to watch her dad get recognized. She'd texted me that morning. "Proud of you, Dad." Ethan drove down from Ann Arbor, wearing a suit he'd bought just for the occasion. He'd never owned a suit before. Told me he wanted to look professional for his old man's big night. My family, the people I'd sacrificed so much time with, finally watching me get the recognition I'd earned. Finally seeing that all those missed dinners and late nights had actually meant something. I kept my speech short. Thanked Patrick Sullivan for taking a chance on me. Thanked my team for proving what experience could accomplish. Thanked Rachel for 23 years of patience. Then I said one more thing. 10 months ago, someone told me that everyone's replaceable. That experience was expensive dead weight. That maybe I should consider an advisory role because the market had changed. I paused, looked out at the audience. She was wrong, and now she knows it. The applause lasted longer than I expected. After the ceremony, I checked my phone. One new voicemail. I recognized the number. Audrey Walsh. I listened to it in the parking lot. "Nathan, I know you probably won't call back. I just wanted to say I made a mistake. A big one. I was arrogant. I didn't see what was right in front of me. For what it's worth, I'm sorry." She paused. I could hear her breathing. "You were never replaceable. I just couldn't see it until you were gone." I deleted the voicemail. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.